Hello and welcome to this episode of Not Cooking, where we're literally not cooking anything at all. Instead, we're going to focus on measuring. Measuring is essential in the culinary world, and you really need to focus on accurate and precise measurements so your final product turns out the way it's intended to. As we're going over the measurement experiments today, you all should be following along with me on your measurement experiment worksheet. So please take a moment to have this out in front of you and be ready to go. The directions say, watch Miss Knott perform the experiments to discover the importance of using standard measuring tools accurately. For each experiment, first, answer the essential question and hypothesize the results you expect to find. After viewing the measurement experiment and recording data, draw conclusions and record your answer in the spaces provided. So let's get started with experiment 1. For experiment 1, we're asked to measure flour in a liquid measuring cup, and we're also asked to measure 1 cup of flour in a dry measuring cup. So let's start with our liquid measuring cup and see how much it weighs in grams. All right, so the issue with the liquid cup is we can't level this. So I'm going to have to tap and shake the cup in order to get to the right measurement. The issue with tapping and shaking the cup is I'm compacting the flour into the cup, and I'm probably going to end up with more than what I need. So it appears that I have 1 cup of flour. Let's see how much it weighs. So I'm going to go ahead and tare my scale, which means I'm setting it to 0 so I don't get the weight of the bowl, I only get the weight of my flour. All right, so our results, 152 grams. Please take a moment to hit pause and write that down on your worksheet where it says liquid measuring cup under experiment 1. As you probably remember from earlier in class, if you're measuring out 1 cup of flour accurately, it should weigh 125 grams. So we can see with the liquid measuring cup, we have way more flour than what we really need. If we were actually making cookies right now and we used 152 grams of flour rather than 125 grams, our cookies would probably turn out pretty dense, dry, and crumbly. So now let's do it the correct way using a dry measuring cup and the spoon and level method. So we're going to spoon it in. You always want to overfill the cup slightly so you can level it off. It's okay to tap once or twice to settle in air pockets, but you don't want to do that too much because you don't want to compact your flour in. So if I've done this just right, this should weigh approximately 125 grams. And we are at 126, so pretty close. Now let's answer the questions for experiment number 1. What is the difference in weight between the cup of flour that weighed the most and the cup of flour that weighed the least? And then tell me, why do these weights vary? We were asked to measure 1 cup of flour, but we ended up with 152 grams for our liquid cup and 126 grams for our dry cup. So in conclusion, list the reasons for following the standard practice of using a dry measuring cup to measure flour. Please press pause now to answer your questions, and then we'll be moving into experiment 2 shortly. For experiment 2, the essential question is, if a recipe says measure 1 cup of flour, should you sift it? What's the purpose of sifting? Please press pause now and answer that question. For experiment 2, the directions say, place a 1 cup dry measuring cup on a piece of parchment paper. Use the sieve and sift flour from the canister directly into the measuring cup until it's heaping full, and then we're going to level. Once we've done that, we'll transfer it into the bowl to see what it weighs. Since we're aerating the flour this time, it should weigh less than 125 grams. So let's see. One of the purposes of sifting your flour is to incorporate air or to aerate. You're going to end up with a lighter, fluffier flour in the end. Another reason you might want to sift is to remove clumps. So maybe we're using something like almond flour and it has a lot of clumps. Sifting could be used for that as well. So this is heaping full. Now we will use the back of the butter knife because it's nice and flat for leveling. So if we've done this correctly, this should actually weigh less than 125 grams because we've aerated the flour. It's a lighter cup of flour, and it's really great for things like pastries. So I'm gonna go ahead and tare my scale, and let's see our results. The sifted flour weighs 115 grams, which is actually perfect because we wanted a lighter, more aerated cup of flour. Now we'll move into experiment 2, step 2, where it says to use a dry measuring cup and measure out the flour until it is heaping full. So we'll use the standard measuring practice of spoon and level. We're gonna avoid tapping and shaking the cup because we don't want to pack in the flour. Then we're gonna use the sieve and we're gonna sift the flour directly into the bowl. So we're gonna go ahead and measure out 1 cup of flour using the standard method of spoon and leveling. So we want to overfill the cup slightly. We're going to tap for air pockets and we're going to level. Now we'll use the sieve to sift the flour directly into the bowl. And our weight is 124 grams. So please take a moment to hit pause and record your data. Time to answer the questions for experiment number 2. Which cup of flour weighed the most and why do the weights vary? If one recipe says 1 cup flour sifted and another says 1 cup sifted flour, is there a difference in the measuring process? So before you answer that question, I want you to think about what I did and how it differed and what was the purpose of doing it that way. Take a moment now to hit pause and answer the questions. Experiment number 3, this is our final experiment for today, and this experiment is going to focus on the importance of leveling. The essential question is, should you always level dry ingredients even if the recipe doesn't say so? Why or why not? Please take a moment to hit pause and answer the question. For experiment 3, the directions say to measure 1 tablespoon of flour without leveling it. Then we're going to see what it weighs in grams. You may be tempted to just scoop right into the flour canister. However, you shouldn't do that because the method we're using for flour is spoon and level. So even though we are just measuring 1 tablespoon, we still need to spoon it in. However, we're not going to level it right now because the directions say not to level. So let's see how much this weighs. 1 unleveled tablespoon weighs 16 grams. Please take a moment to record that on your worksheet. Now we're going to do the same thing a second time. However, this time we are going to level, which is the right way to do it. So we're going to spoon our flour in, tap to settle air pockets, and now we will level. I'm going to tare my scale. The leveled tablespoon weighs in at 8 grams. Please take a moment to record the data on your worksheet. As you can see, when we didn't level, we ended up with a lot more than what we needed. Occasionally, your recipe will say 1 heaping tablespoon. So for example, 3 heaping tablespoons of hot cocoa need to be added to the mug. In that case, the word heaping indicates that we should not level. The only time you should not level is if you see the word heaping on your recipe. Any other time, you should always level your dry ingredients. Let's answer the conclusion question for experiment 3. When recipes call for a tablespoon of a dry ingredient, such as flour, you should always level it. Why is that? Why do we want to make sure that we level? Please take a moment to answer that question now. This concludes our experiments for today. Thanks for watching this episode of Knott Cooking. I'll see you guys next time.